Hey, thanks for joining us this afternoon for our Zoom workshop as part of the EFCA West District Conference. We don't know whether to call it 2020 or 2021. We've planned it so many times, but we're thankful that y'all have hung in with us and have been participating and are ready to jump in. Let me pray real quick and we'll dive in. Lord, thank you for the opportunity to share with brothers and sisters. And we just pray that the things that we do over the next hour or so will be beneficial to your kingdom. Guide our thoughts. And we just look forward to what you're going to do in our lives and in the lives of the churches we serve as we move into this next season. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So thanks a lot for being here again. It's always good to get together and be able to share some things. If you don't know me, I'm Bob Osborne. I serve as the Director of Church Health for EFCA West. I've been doing this for about 7 years now, a little more than 7 years. And basically my work is just working with church leaders. I work on leadership issues, organization, systems, governance documents, pastor transitions, just all kinds of things, response management to crises, leadership training, workshops like this, and a bunch of other stuff. My focus is really having healthy systems and structures and healthy people working together in the church to provide leadership. And so it's a real pleasure to be with you today. Our teammate Soshi Kashon is in Minnesota. She's behind the scenes kind of running things, monitoring chat. She'll populate some things. Feel free as we go through the presentation today to put your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to those near the end of what we're doing. And my partner today, my co-facilitator, is Tracy Moss from North Coast Church in Vista, California. Actually, she's in Carlsbad, California. But Tracy, go ahead and maybe introduce yourself to people who may not yet know you.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. Yeah, I am, and I'm one of the campus pastors for one of our campuses located in Carlsbad, right by the ocean, if you ever want to come hang out and check us out. And I also have the privilege of leading our military ministry for all 7 of our campuses, and for those life groups that are deployed out across the globe. And then I also lead our family support ministry, which I'll talk a little bit about today. And I'm a mom of 2 and a grandma of 3. Oh, and I'm on the board, the EFCA board of directors. I've been on that for about a year and loving that process and what I've learned really about all of you and our amazing movement. So really privileged to get to do that as well.
Yes, last week, Tracy and we were kind of talking through our presentation together, and I reminded her that she had to remember to say she was on the board of directors of the EFCA, and if she didn't, I was going to say it for her. So she managed to sneak that in. We're real excited about that. So yeah, this is your workshop leaders for today, Tracy and Bob. And just a little bit fast on the trigger there. There we go. There we go. What we want to do today is look at 4 shifts for leaders to consider and hopefully implement as we lead churches out of the season we've been in and into the new season ahead of us, whatever it happens to be. There's a lot of uncertainty involved in just trying to imagine what's going to go into the future. There are all kinds of things that we could talk about, and Tracy and I, we just kind of worked with this. We whittled it down to 4 shifts. I'm going to share some things related to these 4 topics that relate to church boards. And Tracy's going to share on those same topics as they relate to church staff. And so, I'll be boards and staff, we should be focused on the same mission, but because we play different roles in the leadership of the church, oftentimes we're looking at those same issues from slightly different perspectives. And we just thought it would be interesting and perhaps helpful if we could share on the same topics, but look at them from those 2 different perspectives. So the 4 shifts that we want to consider and be thinking about as the church moves into this new season is refocus, redefine, rethink, and renew. Clever alliteration. We got all those 4 re's in there, but refocus, that's just a question of like asking ourselves, what is important now? It may well not be. In fact, I would suggest it probably isn't all the things that were important once before. The second area, redefine, is just to help us understand and define what is it that we are now going to be trying to accomplish. What are the important things now? To rethink is this idea of we need to rethink what we do and to shift away from maintaining things, keeping things going, to actually being forward thinking and innovative and thinking ahead and doing innovation. And then the fourth one is the area that we're calling renew. And that just asks to be the question, what are some of the things that perhaps we know, perhaps we've done in the past, that we need to clean up and renew our focus on? We need to make those things more like new. And so Tracy and I are going to rotate off. I'll talk about each of these one by one. I'll mention it from the board perspective, and Tracy will then speak to the same thing on the staff perspective, and then we'll move on to the second one. When we're done, we expect to be done at about, quarter to either a quarter to 2 or quarter to 3, depending on your time zone, and hopefully have plenty of time to answer some questions. So please, if you have questions, put them in the chat box and we'll get to them as soon as we can. Are we ready to go? We'll go ahead and dive on in here. The first area is to refocus. And I think I just froze my screen. There we go. What's the most important thing now? You know, over time, one of the things that I found in myself and in other boards that I've worked with is we can find ourselves in a rut where we're almost, mindlessly doing the same things over and over, and all of our agendas look the same, all of our meetings sound and feel the same. And sometimes encountering a season of disruption is exactly what we need to pause, give us impetus to pause and to think about some things a little bit differently, and specifically to recheck what are we focusing on. And so I want to share what I believe to be 3 critical conversations that church boards should be having as we move through the season that we were in, that we are in now, and into whatever it is that God has for us in the new season that lies ahead. The first question, as you can see, is just, are we a learning center or are we a fishing company? And this is just a question at the end of the day, board member, at the end of the day, after all the things that we have done as a church, like, what do we actually want the outcome to be? What do we want the result to be of all the things that we've done? Are we trying to create more knowledgeable Christians, or are we trying to create Christians who are fishing? And that's often the way the question is asked. I'm going to ask it a third way in just a second. I love a quote that is attributed to D.L. Moody, who said, "The Bible was not given to increase our knowledge. It was given to change our lives." And oftentimes we as board members, we look at things from the perspective of, did we accomplish this task? What exactly are we teaching? And we stop short of asking that vital question, are lives being changed? And if we say, yes, lives are being changed, the follow-up question is, how do we know that? On what basis are we actually saying this? And I want to suggest this learning center fishing company thing is not necessarily a binary decision. It's not an either or. I really believe that for us as churches, we have to run on both those rails, that we should be about the business of producing and helping to develop maturing Christians that are avid and active fishers of men and women. It's not all about maturing them and learning knowledge. It's not all about being, on the street, knocking on doors, or, sharing with our neighbors constantly and not growing our faith. It's about both of those. And if we get to one side or the other, the ride's going to be uncomfortable and the results are going to be less effective. So are we a learning center or a fishing company, or are we doing both of them really well? The second one, are we loving God and loving our neighbor as ourselves? This is so simple. But the question I like to ask for board members, of course, we'll nod our heads and say, oh yeah, we do that. But the question I have is, like, can we pair actual behaviors to our good intentions to do this? Do we have examples of our church loving our neighbors well? Do we have examples of the men and women that are under our care, that we're discipling, loving their neighbors well, loving God with all they have? And just to suggest that if we can't come up with those examples, then we're probably not actually doing it. We would know it if our people were actually loving God with all they have and loving their neighbors as themselves. And then the third thing is just that question, what's weighing us down? You know, over the course of time, programs, overhead, unrealistic expectations, the bureaucratic encumbrances we have, all those kinds of things can weigh us down. I love Hebrews 12, the first few verses there talks about setting aside the things that weigh us down, getting rid of the things that trip us up, and running our race with endurance, fixing our eyes on Jesus. And it just reminds me of like an Olympic marathoner when they finally get away from the monotony of 25 miles and they run into the stadium. They got all these people screaming and cheering and cameras and all that kind of stuff. But the winners keep their focus on the finish line, and they don't pay attention to that other stuff. What is our focus? What is weighing us down that we need to stop doing? There's a good opportunity with COVID because so many things we used to do are shut down. Now let's be careful about what are the things that we fire up again. Are they really moving us forward, or are they actually weighing us down? Tracy, what do you got for us for staff?
Well, I love that, for really just looking back at a little bit for us at what it is that we've been doing, and do we need to continue to do that? For one of us, one of the things is refocusing on our mission. You know, for many of us, we are running at such a rhythm and a pace before COVID that we didn't stop often to recalibrate to the mission that we have. And so I think now is a perfect time to look back and be like, okay, let's remind our staff, let's get our staff together. And I know everybody's tired of Zoom and doing all of this, but we have opportunity right now to be filling in those gaps of where we had missed the mission. You know, it's like that whole mission creep piece that happens. It's like just a little bit over time, just a little degree off. And in a year or two, you are way off target. So it's time to just kind of come back, refocus on the mission. For us in particular, ours is making disciples in a healthy church environment. And what we have is we have what we call vital signs that help us determine and stay with that critical mission. And so now we've just taken opportunity to not only look at how we're operating as ministries, but also personally, and checking in on our staff. You know, we can't lead people to healthy places if we're not healthy people. So for us in particular, we've used those vital signs to determine, are we healthy? And if not, what can we do now to refocus and reset so that when the gates get open wide, we can move forward? And then refocusing with our staff. I'm not sure about you all, but myself personally and my staff we've been all over the place in the last 10 months. Some days everybody's ready to go and can't wait to get going. And then we have others that are just weary and worn out by the whole piece of COVID and waiting and uncertainty and furlough and all of that. So we have an opportunity to refocus and really reconnect with our staff on a completely different level. So even for all ages, we put for stages of life. And so for me right now, I don't have children at home, but I'm watching many of our staff members try to navigate ministry now with less of a team and navigate it in a completely different way. And oh, by the way, they're going to be at home actually teaching their children as well with distance learning. So there's a whole need for me to help them refocus, for me to focus on them in a different way because I have more time. So we're really encouraging all ages and stages of our staff to really come along and connect and support one another, whether that is relationally, physically, spiritually, in their ministry, whatever. So just another piece of, are you refocusing, connecting with your staff? You know, oftentimes we hire leaders because they're leaders and we let them go and we trust them to do their piece. But how long has it been since you've connected and really asked them, how are you doing in all of those areas? Asking questions and really being available to them, and then being very authentic. One thing that we did, we have an essentials process where we look back at the year and get feedback and make new goals. And when we did that this year, one of the things that we heard over and over again from our entire staff at North Coast is over communication was wanted and connection was wanted and needed, and our own leadership authenticity was really important to them. So I would just encourage all of us, even though it might be an uncomfortable places, to really be authentic and vulnerable with your staff right now. Everybody's growing, but to refocus in that way. And then refocusing our mindset. You know, one of the things that we're talking about is just going back to old school Sunday school. It's like, what are we about? We are about connecting and engaging people with the gospel of Jesus. And so are we doing that? Like, that's the focus. We may have stripped away teams. We may have stripped away resources. We may have stripped away all kinds of pieces, but the gospel and our mission, our job has never changed. So what are we doing and how can it look different? How can we support that as leadership? And then I would just say, focus on our focus, because I believe for the last 10 months, we have all been sitting around talking about, man, when we get back to normal, and I think we can take that same scripture that Bob used. It's like, no, we are not looking backwards anymore. There isn't going to be what we used to do. We as leaders need to take the charge. We need to lead. We need to let them be dreamers. We need to talk about creativity. We need to be in the charge of leading our teams forward to the future for innovation. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but stop really having those conversations about, man, when we get back to what's normal, it's not going to be. And if we sit in that, we're not going to focus our eyes on forward of what God has. He's doing something new. He says, even in his word multiple times, like, don't you see it? And I feel like that's where we're at now. It's like, come on, don't you see it? Let's get excited about it instead of bemoaning anymore or mourning what was, but really refocusing on what we can do, what God's called us to do, what's in front of us. It really can be an exciting time for our staff and our teams.
I have to master the unmute button there. Thanks, Tracy. The second area is this idea of redefining some things. And it answers the question, what are we trying to accomplish now? Because once we've determined what our primary area of focus is going to be, we need to put legs to that. We need to think about how are we going to accomplish those things. And let me suggest three things that your church board may want to talk about as perhaps being your three ministry priorities for this next season. You may have others, this may not all fit for you, but these are three things that just really, in my conversations with church leaders and in my own experiences at the church where I serve, just some things that we probably need to redefine. The first one is relationship. So many people are in our churches are clamoring to get back together again, because, and then we diagnose it and say that, you know, we need to have relationships. People need relationships. But I think we need to be careful about how we define relationship, because I believe one of the things we're discovering is that relationship is actually connecting people with people rather than packing them into a room. I hate to say it. I love big church. I love going into worship with several hundred people. I long to do that again, but I have to admit, in my own life, when I walk into a room with 300 people, how many of them am I actually relating with? And how many of those relationships, those very few, are actually deep and meaningful in any way, shape, or form? And I do believe we as Christians do need relationship. We should not forsake gathering together, as is the habit of some, as scripture says. But just how do we as leaders define relationship when we go about offering opportunity for people to relate to one another? Is it packing them in a room? Or is it helping to connect them with other people who can encourage them as they live their Christian life? The second area that I think we need to potentially identify as one of our top priorities is actually making disciples. And I like to ask the question, in churches often we talk about, one of the things that's important to us is making disciples. And I just ask, what's your strategy or process? And, oftentimes there's a pause there, and then people will say something. And then the next question is, are you doing that? And then, how do we know that we're successful? And I do need to be careful when I talk about making disciples, that I'm talking about everything from attracting someone who doesn't follow Christ and inviting them into the family where they become Christ followers, and then hopefully where they grow and mature through the rest of their lives. I'm not talking about a 6-week curriculum that when you've completed that, you're done growing. I'm talking about how are we as leaders going to ensure that the people under our care, the people that we lead, are actually going to continuously grow in their relationship with Christ throughout their lifetime. And so, as I like to say, in terms of spiritual maturity, it's everything from cradle through the grave into eternity. How are we making disciples? And then the third thing, I think, in my life, this is one that I regret that I've missed for most of my adult life. And that's this idea of reaching all people. And the question I encourage us to ask ourselves as leaders is, who is around us that we either currently aren't seeing, we just look right past them and don't notice them? Who are these people who need Jesus and need to be discipled? So much of our focus as leaders are the sheep that are in our congregations, and we forget that the reason that we're here, I mean, I can't think of a better reason for Jesus not to instantly remove someone who gives their life to Christ than for that person to be his witness out in the world. That's what he left us here. That's what he called us to do. And, I'm constantly reminded of the EFCA statement of purpose, that we exist to glorify God by multiplying transformational churches among all people. And I can't help but think that sometimes in the rush of business, what we leaders do is that we become comfortable focusing on transformational churches, and we forget the multiplying, and we forget the all people. And again, I don't share that wagging a finger at you. I point that finger at me because I fall into that trap a lot. Who is out there? We won't look at people that aren't in our church unless we intentionally do that. So, and I, as a leader, when I walk through my community, am I looking for people other than me? Am I looking with eyes to see who's there? Who needs Jesus? We have the gospel. Who can we share that with? Tracy, take us on the staff perspective.
You bet. I love that. So, redefining with our church staff and ministry, one of the things that we have come back to over and over again is, how do you redefine a win? Because right, wrong, or ugly, one of the ways that we define win up until this point is by our numbers. And are we growing? Are we bringing, like Bob says, are we bringing people into the church and introducing them to Jesus? And are we keeping them in the pipeline, the assimilation process? And we have a whole strategy of how we do that, and all of our percentages and that kind of thing that have all gone out the window. And so redefining the win really based on what we're seeing people need. And so one of the ways that we are really looking at that is just asking, have we met a need regardless of what the number is? And an example of that is we had a children's event and a drive-through and activities as celebrating the end of the school year. And our children's pastor was so nervous that the response wasn't going to be great, and that people weren't going to come, and her team had done all of this work. And so we talked about defining a win before it got started. And the very first car that came through was a mom that we're not sure even how other than she saw it on social media, but she didn't get the emails and all of that because her kids weren't even of the right age that it was geared for. But she was the first one out of the chute. She came in at big tears and she said, "You have no idea how badly I needed this today. My kids, we have not been out of the house. We've not done anything. And this is the first time my kids have seen." And she started waving at the teachers. And so as soon as she drove away, we talked about, that's the win. We met the need of one family because we know that that's what's important to Jesus, is one by one, he met the needs. And then sometimes globally as well, or in large crowds, but it's like, that's how we have to start looking at things. If we see a need, And did we meet the need? And if so, then that is our win. And then we grow from there. Another thing to redefine is really ministry, and how do we reach a scattered, what I would call a scattered flock now. And it's going to continue to be that way. So we have everything, and I'm sure you do too, for people who are ready to come. They are ready when the doors open, they're coming, mask on, mask off, whatever that is. And then you have the families that have realized that, man, it is so much easier to do church online because they don't have to get everybody out the door and dressed, and they're still doing it. And then you have the people who won't come because we aren't going to open children's ministry to begin with. And then we have the older or compromised congregation that probably won't be back anytime soon, if at all. And how do you meet the needs of this scattered flock now? Is it new ministries? Is it new staff? We're looking at, maybe there are some staff members that we won't be bringing back or will reassign because we've had to redefine what our ministries really are looking like. And then redefining our connections, and again, our assimilation process. So I don't know about you, but we have a whole process to close that back door. Well, those aren't really working right now. Many of us aren't even sure where the back door is right now. And because we have online and we have all these scattered pieces and people across the country. And so how are you redefining this connection and this connecting point that our folks are needing, including our staff members? And so it's going to look different. How are you becoming this sticky church? How are you using online versus in person? And so meeting those needs, redefining it, and then meeting that. For many of us, our strategic piece now is very individualized. It's I meet with staff members, and it's looked very different depending on the need or the life set of where my folks are, whether that's I meet with them on Zoom or Teams. Some I've walked with, some I've had coffee with, some I've been on the phone with, some I've just done prayer time with. So really just redefining what it looks like to lead your team, connect with your team, and then also with your congregation, and helping your teams and your staff really see that as a new way that we'll be doing church for quite some time, and really looking at the just redefining how we do all of that. But all of that takes flexibility. So we have to look at our own selves as leaders, and I tend to be a person who likes control, so it's been a good stretching point for me, but we have to learn to be flexible and look at things in a new way.
Thanks, Tracy. We'll move into our third category of things to rethink. And the idea here is that perhaps we need to shift from maintaining things and keeping things going to being forward-looking and engaged in innovation. I think it's obvious by now that new circumstances, new seasons, if you will, require new thinking by leaders. I doubt that any of us want to become the blockbuster video church in our community that just kept focused on doing what we've always done to the point where we ran ourselves out of business as we were no longer relevant to the world around us. And so I want to share with you 4 areas in which I think the new circumstances we face require us as board members to think differently. The first is in the area of innovation. It's my premise here that most church boards, if not all of them, tend to be pretty conservative in terms of their willingness to try something new, something different, something that hasn't been proven successful. I don't know a whole lot of board members who get excited about trying something that may not work, and just to see if it works. And yet there are so many things that we could do that we'll never know if they work if we don't try them. One of the things I've been really excited about, and I'll share a book title with you, actually I'll share 2 on this topic, that have been really helpful for me, is the ability to differentiate between a technical challenge and an adaptive challenge. A technical challenge is pretty simple. If my washing machine breaks, I call a washing machine repairman. He or she knows what to do. They come in, there are plans, they take out the offending part, put in the new part, test it, and hopefully it works again. It's a technical challenge. It's beyond my expertise. And so when I encounter something like that, I call in an expert and they tell me what to do or they do it for me. An adaptive challenge is completely different and it requires a different type of action by us leaders. An adaptive challenge is a challenge that involves something that we've never seen before. We don't know what to do. There isn't an instruction manual that gives us step-by-step instructions how to fix it. We have to adapt, and we don't necessarily know exactly what that looks like. Two books that I think would be really helpful to you. They've been helpful to me as it relates to my own ability to have a greater tolerance for innovation and trying new things. The first is a book called Canoeing the Mountains by Todd Bolsinger, T-O-D Bolsinger. And basically what he does is he teaches church leaders how to work through adaptive challenges using the Lewis and Clark expedition. If you're familiar with that history, Thomas Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark and their team up to find the headwaters of the Missouri River and then to see what's on the other side all the way to the Pacific. And so they took off in their boats and canoes and all that kind of stuff, expecting that the other side of the mountain was going to be like a mirror image or something like that of the East Coast. And what they discovered was the Rocky Mountains. So now they're trying to figure out, how do we canoe the mountains or do we accept this adaptive challenge? Excellent book that I heartily recommend. And then the other one that really, I think, relates well and helps us understand what we might do as it relates to trying new things is Sticky Leaders by Larry Osborne. Basically, the premise there is really simple, and that is that most innovations fail. And so once we get over that hump, it's like, okay, so how do we as church leaders deal with that as we try new things? Very, very practical. It's been very, very helpful to me in helping me to become more comfortable with innovation. Then quickly, these last three things here. The first one is our oversight style. I think more than ever, we're going to find as board members that we need to be less controlling and more empowering and releasing. Set the direction, set the boundary, and let leaders go, subordinate leaders go and accomplish the things they need to do with the flexibility that they need it. I'll confess that most of us think that we're empowering and releasing leaders rather than controlling. But for many of us, we would be surprised if we asked staff and other people that we are giving leadership to if they find us controlling or empowering. And that might be a good question to ask from time to time. The second thing to rethink is how we equip people. How's our church equipping? And what are we equipping for? Are we equipping the saints for the work of the weekend? Or are we equipping the saints for them to be effective followers of Jesus, ambassadors for Jesus, gospel purveyors in their community during the week? And I want to suggest those are two completely different things, and that sometimes it's easy for us to focus on the weekend and forget that we need to be equipping the saints for the week. And then the last thing, I can do it pretty quickly here, is that's just this idea of when we gather together as board members, so oftentimes we think we're gathering to make decisions, and we are. But I want to suggest that we rethink that process and just intentionally gather together to have great discussions about the issues we face. Not to make a decision, but to have a great discussion. Because I can tell you certainly from personal experience that when we have a great discussion, we have a great decision. And when we don't have a great discussion and we get right to making a decision, we miss it from time to time. So what we've done is we've just decided when we gather together, we're going to be all about the discussion and let the decision just ensue instead of trying to work hard to get quickly to that decision. Tracy.
Yeah, so rethinking for church staff, first of all, you have to look at your priorities, because that's a place where we have really made some shifts, and looking at quality over quantity. Larry uses it a lot, but it's like we as leaders like it big, but people like it small. I would say the same of like, we like to do things in big ways, but people really do like the close personal piece. So whether that's sending out a mass email versus making a phone call, we have just made that shift of our priority is going to be quality connects with people, whether that's calls, visiting, dropping things off at people's door, all of those pieces. So just really looking at that priority, looking at, we talk about the church is not the building. When people say the church has been closed, it's like, nope, turns out the church isn't closed, because the church isn't the building, it's us, it's the people, and what are we doing? And Bob was talking about being, looking out. And so we have just, in particular, we've made an attempt at really looking at our community and the needs in the community, and making that a priority, that we are the hands and feet of Jesus out in our community day in and day out, because that is a way that we can continue to be the church in the midst of a pandemic and us not being able to meet in a building. So really rethinking what the priority is and what we're going to put our resources to. Rethinking your teams. This can be an exciting time. It can be a scary time too, but we oftentimes at North Coast, we will zero base teams, we will zero base our ministries. Each year we zero base what we're going to focus on. So it's something that we use often, but it's very effective to be able to just get in front of a whiteboard and really look at, where are we going? What do we want to innovate and do well in the future? It really makes you be a forward thinker. And then who do we need to bring along to do that? And right now, for us in particular, we have furloughed some folks. And so this has allowed us an opportunity to really look at ministries, look at the need, look at what the priorities are, and then place people. Oftentimes we say, get someone on the bus, and then we'll get them on the right seat as, eventually as their skills grow and as their gifts show. And so this has given us a really good opportunity to be able to shift some folks and really zero base those teams. Even your organizational charts, I would encourage you just get those out and really have some good, healthy discussion, as Bob would say, because I think your answers really do come out from that. And then rethinking your resources. I'm sure many of you have rethought where your resources are going for online versus in person, whether it's going to be adding new staff, adding new equipment, all of those pieces. Where are your resources, time, money, and energy? Where are they going, and where are they going to go in the future? And really bring your staff along. Let them help you create those new systems and programs and ministries, that kind of thing. And then also rethinking events, and I would add on that events and ministries. All of our camps are going to look different, retreats, conferences, but they still go on. We just have to be creative in how we're going to do that. Rethink what those are going to look like. Again, not looking back at what things were in the past or what normal was, but what can we do now that will energize and engage and connect with people. One in particular, we saw a need with families and doing virtual learning and trying to keep jobs, and marriages struggling. If there was a crack in the marriage, we saw that there were some issues there. And so we created an online ministry called Family Support Ministry. And so we reallocated resources financially, we reallocated staff resources and online resources, and it has been a huge win. And the win was redefined. We were thinking hundreds of people would need it. Turns out not so much. But the people who have engaged, and we have engaged with them, we feel like real wonderful, wonderful, rich ministry has happened. So again, just being able to rethink and look at those things allows you to see a need, meet a need, and not in the building, but outside into our community and what the world is needing.
Thanks, Tracy. We come to the fourth shift that we're talking about. This is idea of renew. What is it that needs to be made like new? And for me, as I was thinking through this as it relates to church boards, I came to the thought came to my mind, there may be some core commitments that we as church board members, church leaders need to reaffirm. And so I have 5 here that I'm just going to go through quickly. The first is to lead like shepherds. I love the fact that scripture so often uses the metaphor of the shepherd to describe Jesus himself as the good shepherd, but also those who provide leadership. This idea of leading like a shepherd, excuse me, is not new, but I think we need to ask, like, what exactly does that mean? And as I've thought about that, there are two things. First of all, I need to be with the sheep in order to understand what the sheep need. I need to talk with sheep. I need to walk with sheep. I need to, pry into their lives. I need to ask good questions. I need to do all that kind of stuff for me to understand the sheep that I'm responsible to care for. But then one of the lessons I've learned in these last 10 months is how hard it is to focus on providing what the sheep need, not what the sheep want. That's such a powerful, the sheep is such a powerful metaphor, but we as leaders, especially board members, are so often tempted to cave in and give the sheep what the loudest, most annoying bleating sheep in the flock is calling for. And that's what we're going to do to make that go away. When the role of the shepherd is to take care of the flock of sheep, which includes individuals, but the flock. What does the flock need? Not so much what does the flock want. The other core commitment I think we as leaders need to reaffirm, especially in the times of uncertainty that lie ahead, is to keep growing in our leadership knowledge and skills. I can almost guarantee you that if you don't have a time that you schedule and put on your calendar as a board to meet together, to grow and to learn new things as leaders and new skills as leaders, that you're probably not doing that. And what happens is the knowledge and skills that got us here will keep us here, even as the world passes us by. And so just to encourage you to reaffirm a commitment to keep growing in our knowledge of leadership, our leadership knowledge and our leadership skills. This third one speaks very clearly to me, and that is to renew and affirm a commitment to inquisitiveness, which for me just means more questions, fewer answers. I love being the answer man. Most of the leaders I know, especially the male leaders, love to be answer men. But one of the things that I'm learning, I can't say I've learned it because I haven't mastered it yet, is that I have better answers if I ask more questions. And I probably need to give 3 or 4 questions for every answer to really understand. We as leaders need to be asking questions, not just giving answers. I do think we also need, this is a great time for us to renew our core commitment to the gospel and to all people. Our programs and stuff have been shaken to the core. Lots of things have stopped. What a great time to pause and just to humbly consider before God, what is the level of our commitment? What has it been to the gospel and to reaching all people? And what should it be in the future? And then whenever I think about core commitments and reaffirmation, I'm always haunted by Jesus's message to the church in Ephesus in chapter 2 of Revelation. We need to renew our commitment to our first love, Jesus. That church was doing so many great things, but Jesus said, I have this one thing against you, and that's you've moved away from your first love. And if you don't repent of that, I'm going to remove your lampstand. And I just think this is a great time, a time of uncertainty for us to pause as board members and to reaffirm personally and together as a team that Jesus is in fact our first love and the reason that we lead. Tracy.
Yeah, that's so good. I told Bob when we went through this the last time, I said, I think you can just finish that out. And he was like, no. So I put renew with our church staff, connections and commitment. But Bob, I'd like for you to go back to your slide there, because those really all go hand in hand, don't they? You know, I'm going to go full circle to what I started with, of just what's our mission. Bob talked about it. It's the thread through this is just, our mission is to connect people with the gospel. But what I would say too, as far as our staff, those we work with and those we lead, it's like, if we aren't better personally and relationally and spiritually for ourselves and our making sure our staff is too, then we've missed the mark here. we've been given an opportunity to slow down programming, slow down what we're doing. And when we talk about all this new, creative, innovative, I mean, it's exhausting too. So we've got both sides there, but we've had the opportunity to really have time to reflect. And I hope that we've done that. I think part of the thing that I love about what I've had the opportunity to do is to make sure that myself and my staff are well equipped. Bob was talking about, growth. Don't miss the opportunity for growth and continue being a lifelong learner of Jesus and the gospel and the word and of people. And so are we giving opportunity for our staff to learn and grow together and individually? Are we providing new opportunities? So, I mean, as you know, there's a plethora of things online. There's all kinds of leadership pieces. Are you walking your staff through that? Are you yourself growing? Do you have a mentor? All those pieces, I'd say renew your commitment to the growth of being a follower and being a leader. Those are both places where God has called all of us that are on this workshop. It's like, so make sure that we are doing that. And then we are doing that again. And that ripple effect is happening, is that it goes out from us, so just those connections, commitment to growth, asking the questions, being connected with people in just a whole new way. It's just, it should give us a renewed sense of energy and love for Jesus and those that we serve and that we are serving with.
Thank you, Tracy. We're going to spend a little time looking at the things on chat. We wanted to put our email addresses up there because, of course, if you have a question or a comment or a thought that you'd like to address to either Tracy or myself, feel free to contact us. We want to serve you and be of value to you and a benefit to you and your ministry. So feel free to reach out if you've got something. I'm going to shut down this screen so that I can see some of the chat questions here and see what we have. So Soshi, thank you for putting the information about canoeing the mountains and sticking leaders. Yeah, John, it's interesting your comment how elders can discuss and end up avoiding making any decisions. That's, there's an interesting thing that I share with some boards on request, and it relates to the role of the chairman. What is the role of the chairman? And the thing that we're all afraid of is the chairman who thinks they're super elder, or super board member, and now I'm in control and I can run this the way I want. But really the role of the chairman is to facilitate the business of the board. And that includes the scheduling of things and helping to keep people on track. And if there isn't anyone on that board who is undertaking that role, somebody needs to do it. Somebody's got to do that. I like to suggest that it's the chairman's role, it's that person's responsibility to keep things moving forward. And even again, an example at our church, we were really grappling and having a hard time figuring out what to do in recent weeks about COVID. And so we actually had 3 additional meetings beyond what we normally do. They were all Zoom. They were all an hour to 2.5 hours long, as we just really struggled in our discussion trying to figure out where we would all fit together. But at the end of the day, last Friday, we made a great decision. And it's just because we worked through it. We knew we had to make progress on it. And so we just kept going at it over and over and over again.
I'd like to touch on Tim's question about morale. And I love it that you asked that. And again, I mentioned like our staff has been all over the place, depending on what month we're in. One of the things that I have seen to be a key morale booster, 2 things that I think of immediately is when we're doing meetings like this, we do have a bunch of funny people on our staff. And so the chat line begins to be this just comedy of, mainly our youth guys and gals started, and then we all kind of just chime in. So it doesn't matter. I mean, we're all in different places, we're all in different spaces, but that has really connected us and kept our, we'll even refer back to other chats where people are putting GIFs up and all kinds of things. So we keep it really lighthearted. We try to make it fun. We've tried to do raffles and, just things to make people want to come to those Zoom meetings and actually stay engaged in them. But really the chat amongst us has been something that has kept us together. And another thing that I have watched, and the comfort level of people actually engaging in this has been very different, but we have done our I mentioned, community service as being one thing that we have tried to do a lot of in this time, is be really active in our community. And so we've done a variety of drive-throughs, whether it's been a canned food drive, we've done a winter supply drive, we've done a winter wonderland, we've done the kids activities. And what I've found for teams is it doesn't matter whether it was somebody who wasn't comfortable being a part of the drive-through, but they were a part of the process. So they might come in midweek and do something for us that needed to be done that can be done individually beforehand. And our team tends to get dressed up and do things in themes, even if it's not themed out. So it's just, so that has really brought us together. One of the things that I missed when I was talking about our children's ministries drive-through is one of the wins I talked to her about is all of her team were all separated out in our auditorium as they were preparing, but they were all catching up and they were all talking about life and they were all checking in with each other. And pretty soon over here, somebody was praying for someone else. And another time somebody was checking in over here with somebody else. And so those pieces of us actually feeling like we were still a part of a ministry and it was doing something really effective really did help our morale. You could see the dialogue and the engagement weeks after continuing because of those things. So, and it can look different. You don't have to all be in one space to make that happen.
All right, Bethany, you're a rock star. Love that. Every group needs somebody that makes the group fun. And,
Right. That's
sometimes
right.
it's hard. I've been the goofball myself from time to time. I'm always a goofball, but, sometimes it's hard to gauge how much goofball other people can stomach. But yeah, that's important. Hey, Matt asked a question about, other than the senior pastor, how often would we recommend staff and the elders meet and, perhaps staff and key ministry leaders and volunteers. And I do have an answer I give because I get that question fairly often. And that is, it all depends. It really depends on the culture of your church. It depends on, some churches have adopted a management style that, where staff and elders don't mix. I'm not a big fan of that, but, so, you don't want to create insurrection and, do all that kind of stuff. But I could very clearly answer this by saying periodically, but let me give you the principle that I found. I think one of the weaknesses that we have as board members is that we can unintentionally, and despite our best intentions, become insular. Because what typically happens is we come to our meetings and we meet together. And then we go out and do whatever we do. And then we come back in 2 weeks or a month, however often we meet, and we meet together. And all of the ideas we share are our own ideas. And over time, we become insular. And so what I like to recommend is that elders, if you're discussing something that isn't your area of expertise, invite someone who has that area of expertise to come in and to participate in your discussion. Remember, discussion is more important than decision. Invite them in for the discussion of that topic. One of my favorite elder meetings was the one a few years ago, and my church hasn't mastered this principle. I'm one of 7 votes, so I don't always win. But we had a special meeting where we wanted to know, how are the sheep doing? How is the flock? And we invited all the staff to come, what we would call ministry staff, hands-on ministry staff. And we invited them to come and to tell us what they are experiencing working with the flock in their area of expertise. Children's ministry, tell us about parents, tell us about children, what's going on. And, same with student ministries and adults and, small groups and all that kind of stuff. All of us elders, we agreed that our small groups, we talk about our small groups and our good friends and ourselves, because none of us were like actively leading ministry. We did have one of the guys that was in youth ministry, but we were involved in some other things. And one of the things that we discovered was that we didn't have a clue what was going on because we never asked. And it was so rich to sit there and learn so much about what our children's pastor is facing, what our student ministry pastor was, what our junior high guy was facing, and the issue. And it helped us minister to their adults. You know, frankly, I don't feel that old, but my nest has been empty for a long time. And even talking about COVID, we were, you know, all us guys, you know, on our board were, you know, we used the elder model and we're all men, and that has its own weakness. But, you know, we were talking about the impact of COVID, and really all of us were doing pretty good. And then it dawned on us that none of us were two-income families that have 3 kids at home, all in different grades. And there are 5 laptops going, and we're all homeschooling. And it's like, we don't have a clue unless we ask people what's going on with COVID. And we're going to make really stupid decisions if we don't ask those questions. And so, Matt, to answer your question, as often as it's deemed to be beneficial for the discussion, I like to have the elders actually make the decision themselves without a bunch of other people, because it just facilitates the open sharing. But the discussion is more important than the decision. Any other questions you have? We got just a couple of minutes and then we'll need to close. Okay, not seeing any and not seeing anything else that says go for it. Okay, so let me kind of close this out. I'm going to ask Tim to pray for us when we're done here, but there are a couple of things I want to call to your attention. First of all, thanks, Tracy, for joining me and sharing your perspective. One of the things I've loved over the last couple of years is getting to know Tracy. And that happened at the EFCA 1 conference here a while back. Very great. And that reminds me that there are 2 things coming up. Next week is the EFCA Theology Conference. You can still register for that. It's free. So just type into your search engine, EFCA Theology Conference. It'll go right to the website. And then in June this year, 22, 23, and 24, the EFCA 1 every other year national conference will be held at Fullerton free. And we're assuming COVID will allow that to happen, okay? And until it doesn't, that's what we're going to focus on. But I want to specifically share with you all that that's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On Monday, June 21st, in the afternoon to early evening at the Diamond Bar, Evangelical Free Church, 7 miles north of Fullerton, we're going to have an EFCA West gathering. And so if you're making travel plans, please plan to come early enough to stop by there and hang out with us, meet other people in the EFCA district, hear some of the stories so many great things are going on. We would love to have you be a part of that. 2 other things that are really germane to this particular workshop is that EFCA West is going to have 2 different learning cohorts that are going to kick off in March and go March, April, May. Each of them are 5 sessions of about 2 hours each. The first one is designed for board members and elders, and the other one is designed for what we're calling mid-level leaders. And basically that's ministry staff other than a lead pastor. If you're not like, if I can use the hierarchical language, if you're not top dog, you're a mid-level leader if you're leading in a ministry. And I encourage you to, if you type into your browser efcawest.org, you will go to our page. It's the easiest way to get there. It's cheating, but it's the easiest way. And all you do is you click on the cohort tab, and there will be information on both of those things, as well as the opportunity to register. And we would really, really encourage you to do that. We do have one more workshop after this at 5 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Mountain. It won't be much good for me because it is in Espanol. But if you speak Spanish, or you have someone on your team there that works in the Spanish language ministry of some type or is interested, you might want to encourage them. They could still register for that. It'll be at 5 o'clock Pacific time. And I think that's what I had. If we can help you in any way, shape, or form, please let us know. Tim, you want to take us home?
Sure. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Bob. If you do go to our website, please know that it's in bad need of a facelift, and it's going to be getting that very soon. But we have all kinds of other, we have our podcast page, we have our YouTube channel that's got like just dozens of videos, all of our Zoom meetings from last year, a ton of helpful information for you. And as always, as Bob said, please reach out to us. Sometimes people will say, well, hey, I know you're really busy. Like, yeah, we're supposed to be busy because of you guys. You are our business. So you have your priority. Never feel shy about reaching out to us. And if we can't help you, we'll find someone who can help you. So in any case, let me pray for you, and then we'll go. Father, thank you for this time that we've had together, and for the new thinking. God, you are doing something new, and we believe in your sovereignty. You were not surprised by COVID. You were not surprised by any of the upheaval that has happened over the past year. In fact, you have prepared and ordained that each of us would be alive at this time in this place to handle the challenges in front of us. And so I pray that you would take away the fear that limits our thinking, that limits our vision, and that we would just step boldly. We don't have to figure out the next 5 or 6 years. We don't have to know where we're going to be even in the next 24 months. God, give us enough light to see the next 90 days and then move towards that. And then we'll see the next 90 days and move towards that. And God, may this be just an incredible time in all of our various locales that we are represented here, of people coming to know you, of leadership teams being formed and reformed, and of people being able to look back someday and say, wow, you were at work in ways we just could not have predicted. And so we look forward to hearing about what you're going to do in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you all.